everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Well, Harry and Meghan's interview was disappointing to say the least. Most of all because it was very much focused on them and their personal stories or questions, and there were no experts, no actionable information given, no advice. It was very doom and gloom, and we didn't actually get to hear a whole lot about what this platform or website launch really was, what its goals were, what purposes it was going to serve. Harry and Meghan have launched a website called the Parents Network via Archewell for parents who have lost a child. It says to form an online community to share their stories, and I guess to talk to one another and connect. Even Jane, the interviewer here, says that it's a small start because just a few parents are involved at this particular point. So it's not groundbreaking, given that there's already lots of other platforms similar to this, and it's not necessarily creating change either. It is creating an outlet for those parents whom I have the deepest of sympathies for, and anything that could ease their grief and the pain that they've gone through and still experience should not be judged or discounted in any way. But it does beg the question, with all of the online spaces already established, or literally every sort of person in every sort of group, how is creating yet another platform or forum for this going to really benefit them or the cause? Especially given that all the parents are not attributing their loss to online activity or online bullying specifically. Like for some, it was an overdose, for example. It's not a particularly narrow focus. Furthermore, creating an online forum like this one is relatively inexpensive. And I only mention this because with Harry and Meghan and Archewell behind it, you have to wonder why there isn't something more substantial, because this isn't some sort of huge financial undertaking, and it's also not particularly impactful like on its own. And of course, not everything a foundation or a public figure does needs to be some big donation of money or expensive. Initiatives don't need to cost a lot and don't always need to cost a lot to make change. But it does need to have an impact. Donating money to food pantries does have a big impact because they can buy lots of food, feed lots of people with it. Donating time to environmental cleanup does have a big impact. The more time you spend, the cleaner the environment gets, the more trash that gets picked up, things like that. But that costs nothing. Gathering experts to deliver helpful information on how to keep children safe in the online world can be moderately expensive but hugely impactful. But yet that's not what they did. The point is, looking at this website launch as it is now, I cannot clearly see the impact that it will have beyond story sharing, which can be cathartic, but is not necessarily change-making. At the same time, it's impossible to ignore the fact that this is a little bit redundant. So why then has Archewell launched their own? The currency involved here in this platform or network is information. Archewell and thus the Sussexes will be able to harvest any of the stories submitted to this website and shared on this platform for their own use, however they see fit. Putting myself in these families' shoes, that is not something I would be comfortable with. And it's not exactly sitting well with the public either, the idea that the Sussexes could potentially take these very sensitive stories and utilize them in a way that boosts or benefits themselves. Essentially, this network is not just a kind gesture. The reason why this doesn't seem like it's going to have a big or meaningful impact beyond the parents having another outlet option is because it's not very focused. It's not focused exclusively to online bullying being tied to distress or loss. And at this point, smartphones and the interwebs are such a huge part of everybody's everyday life. It's how we order groceries or food or get places or find directions, all of these things. So it's impossible to isolate any tragedy from the internet completely. So that has created a really broad net for this website's intended audience. We are led to believe that the Sussexes, via Archewell, are wanting to have an impact on online bullying. That's their goal here, one of their causes. If that were the case, then it would be much more beneficial and helpful in discovering innovative solutions to have this network focused on parents who attribute their children's distress, mental health struggles, or loss directly to online bullying itself, and people who have lived through it, young adults and teenagers, as well as adults who have experienced online bullying, to really focus it in on that, as well as pulling in experts to specifically address online bullying itself. It would seem from the little information that we got that this platform is very, very broad. And I'm not criticizing this a platform having a broad reach, but rather if this is meant to support a cause for the Sussexes of making progress in changing or protecting people against online bullying, then that does need a more narrow focus. The more focused you are when you're trying to solve a problem or approach an issue, the better you can actually find solutions that will work. So the approach that they've taken here feels too broad to create any meaningful change, unfortunately. But let's take a look at some of their interview itself. Firstly, we see Meghan and Harry hugging strangers. As Meghan hugs this lady, she says, "Nice to meet you." And this feels inappropriate. You shouldn't launch yourself at people who are strangers for a hug on camera. It's a massive power play and quite unfair. For those people, they feel like they can't retreat or just do a handshake instead for fear that they might look rude or particularly awkward on camera. Even Jane here goes to shake hands with Harry and he does a weird half hug anyway while shaking hands. It's astonishing. She put her hand out to shake hands and instead he tries to come at her for a hug. You've got to respect people's bubbles when you're meeting them for the first time. Not everybody likes hugs, wants hugs, or is familiar with hugging strangers or comfortable with it. When somebody puts their hand out actively, then you should pick up on that and not go ahead and wrap your arm around their shoulders anyway, Harry. It kind of makes me feel sad to see these parents who will never, ever be able to put the pieces of their broken hearts back together being taken advantage of in this way, being subjected to these sorts of tactics selfishly executed by the Sussexes just so that they can have this image as huggers. Why are they so fixated on that? The reason behind this seems to be so that they can put out another hug lunging at strangers compilation for Archwell again at the end of the year like they did last year. It's so disrespectful. I can't even. We have to move on. Like we expected, the interview portions with Harry and Meghan were very focused on themselves because, of course, Jane initiated the short interview with them by mentioning that they have experience with online bullying themselves. Two problems with that. Firstly, everyone who is online and everyone who leads any sort of a public-facing life or has a public-facing job or is on the internet in any way, shape, or form, actors, politicians, business owners, CEOs of big companies, royals, celebrities, everyone, just the average Joe who is online on social media has been bullied online, technically speaking. We know this. It is commonplace, unfortunately, but it is just the way it is. People will have an opinion of you no matter what. And you're never going to be everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone is going to like you. People will disagree with you. People will criticize you. No one is immune to negative comments online, and it doesn't always equate with true bullying. Secondly, Harry and Meghan were more so criticized than bullied, largely. Like way, way more in the category of criticism. They have been criticized because they bullied the royal family for years, as well as specific journalists and staff who they have called out over the years. Where is Jane's questions about even just Spare alone having some bullying vibes in it? Harry and Meghan have done more bullying than most public figures. Remember, the definition of bullying is a person who habitually seeks to harm or intimidate those whom they perceive as vulnerable. The royal family having a policy to never explain and never complain means they are vulnerable to criticism in that they will not come out to defend themselves, correct people's statements in most situations. Harry and Meghan have habitually, year after year, project after project, made comments that are designed to harm and or intimidate the royal family members. And not just the royal family members, but also journalists, people from Harry's life prior to Meghan Markle, specific members of palace staff. The list goes on. Next in the interview, Harry reveals himself to be incredibly clueless and reckless with the subject at hand in this particular clip.
We're safe, right? And now they can be in the next door room on a tablet or on a phone and can be going down these rabbit holes. And before you know it, within 24 hours, they could be taking their life.
Our kids are young.
This is not how you discuss this issue, because that would be a really extreme case to go from 0 to absolute 100 in less than 24 hours. Firstly, But more importantly, it makes it seem like an irrational concern because of the excessiveness of this example that Harry uses. When you don't discuss these things intelligently, then it can make it seem overblown, like people are overreacting or exaggerating the problem and making it seem worse than it really is because you're using such unrealistic anecdotes or examples of it that just don't actually make sense, or are not carefully and strategically chosen to be good examples to demonstrate the majority of the issue and represent it well. The way Harry represented this issue is terrifying and extreme, and would be a very extreme case. I can think of a dozen other examples that would have been more accurate and more relevant to the issue at hand and made a lot more sense and connected with the viewers better, painting a more realistic picture of what's going on. Like, for example, parents maybe missing some of the signs, determining between a child or a young person in distress over online activities, starting to maybe fall into some degree of depression or negative thought patterns versus normal teenage moodiness. Those subtle signs being hard to recognize is something that parents could identify as a reasonable concern and important to learn about how to recognize those signs to keep their kids safe. What Harry did here is completely different than that and not helpful. Fear-mongering is laced throughout this interview, particularly from Harry, which does demonstrate his negative and paranoid worldview. He seems to speak about things in very extreme, often exaggerated manners, almost like in absolutes. And that in and of itself is a problem. Speaking in definites leaves no space for nuance or the complexity of this issue. Meghan's comments about their kids follows this, and I agree with those of you who said that her use of the word but is strange here.
Our kids are young. They're 3 and 5. They're amazing. But all you want to do as parents is protect them. And so
rather than and as parents or so. Like, for example, it would make way more sense to say, as a parent, you realize just how precious children are, and it really motivates you to want to safeguard them from these sorts of things, or something like that. And then the interview goes there to Meghan Markle's comments that she experienced a mental health crisis while pregnant with Archie. This was something that probably should have been left out of this interview altogether. It draws attention to the fact that there were inconsistencies in Harry and Meghan's accounts of things. They lied and exaggerated in this interview a lot. He did essentially nothing to help Meghan. He said he didn't or couldn't tell anyone, that he couldn't get her help at all. And these claims really didn't add up with her account of the situation, that she went to HR and was told it wouldn't be good optics, just all sorts of inconsistencies in that. We're not getting into that today. But regardless, it does highlight the fact that Harry did not respond to this alleged crisis well at all. And he sits here with no further education or training trying to discuss this and say the whole first responder line. When Meghan is asked about her connection and experience to this issue, she really doesn't give any further details, which is completely fine and acceptable, probably better because there have been a lot of lies and inconsistencies. But she does sort of take this martyr approach that irritated a lot of people online, particularly because she says if sharing my story can help even just one person, but she simultaneously does not share her story. But she is sure to toss in there that she wasn't believed, so it kind of comes across as opportunistic. Harry looks a bit uncomfortable with this line of questioning, and it is a bit clunky in delivery on all their parts. Jane really stumbles over her words leading into this questioning. Meghan answers are really clunky. Perhaps most interestingly, he doesn't return any physical gesture during this segment. He doesn't take her hand. She just keeps her hand resting on his knee.
These families, and I see you touch your husband's hand in just the way I knew that you would be looking after each other.
And yet he's not reaching out. They're not actually holding hands in this moment. Meghan is just holding onto Harry's leg. It's really weird, and we're meant to believe that this was a harrowing moment in their history together that inspired this sort of dismal initiative. But yet Harry has no response, no reaching out, no sort of protective or empathizing gesture from him at all. No physical connection. He doesn't comfort her. It's sort of telling, but whatever. This whole interview was an absolute mess between their own history of bullying people and the lack of knowledge about this issue, absolute lack of setting a good example on it or constructive content provided at all. As for their outfits, I think that Harry would have benefited from some sort of a color, like maybe navy or blue. Something other than black would have been nice. Even a sweater or a jumper would have been fine. It would have felt a little bit more approachable, a little bit warmer, but because of the black plus the messy tuck of the shirt, it's not working. This outfit looks like it doesn't belong together. Meghan here in her standard frump uniform, way too big, really baggy in the crotch. My goodness, look at that. It is hemmed properly though. I love this length of trouser for her, and I do like the fit of the trousers through the leg because it balances out those thinner, longer limbs. It's just far too big of a rise for her shorter torso. If the rise of the trousers, the crotch of the trousers didn't hang so low, this whole thing would have been a million miles better despite being beige again. I do think it was a poor choice of shoe. You should go slightly darker rather than slightly lighter than the hem in a situation like this. I don't love the straps on the shoes, but that can help to shorten the long appearance of her feet because she has longer, thin feet and she wears shoes a little too big. So having those horizontal lines across the top of the foot can help make it look more balanced. It just would have looked nicer in a slightly darker hue. I do think some degree of color would have been really nice for Meghan. Maybe something soft like a lavender would have been nice. There was a lot of attention to her appearance in the comment section, from her face to her hair. I am no plastic surgery expert. I'm not into plastic surgery at all. But from a makeup artist perspective, she did used to have a considerable hood to her eyelid. She has rather deep set eyes, slightly smaller eyes, and she has always had a bit of a hood to her eye, which was more pronounced during pregnancy or times of weight gain. The hood would go away to some degree with weight loss, but not necessarily to this degree typically. So I think that there is a chance that she did some sort of like procedure to have some of the eyelid hood reduced or lift the brow to some degree. Perhaps it's possible, sure, because there is much less of a hood now than there was previously. That's all I can say about that. The shimmer element to the eyeshadow was a good move because shimmers will stand out. They highlight, they come forward a little bit more. And since she does have those deeper set or recessed eyes, shimmering eyeshadow and lighter colored eyeshadows will help to bring them forward a little bit more. So that part of it was good. It was a bit under blended across the brow bone area. It looks kind of messy. So I wish that had been corrected or fixed a little bit. It's okay to underblend a little bit for TV, but you don't want to underblend to this extent necessarily where you can see an uneven line. If you're going to underblend, it should at least be a rather smooth line. As for the questions about her hair, from a hairstylist perspective, I do not think this is a wig. I think that she has a lot of extensions in, and some of them are right underneath the part along the front area here. It doesn't look like a wig to me personally. I could of course be wrong, but looking at the sections where there is hairline visible, zooming in really carefully, I just don't see any evidence of a lace front wig. I know they are really, really good these days, and people who know what they are doing or professionals applying them can give a really, really impressively seamless look. From what I can see, this looks like a genuine hairline, but with lots and lots of extensions put in. This is just a slightly different styling approach, a little bit more down and towards the face rather than closing it in right here. It's a little bit more closed in across the top area and a little bit less severe of a part. There is a trick of putting eyeshadow on your part if you're going to be on camera, especially with like film lighting above you. If you're going to be on camera, you'll put a little eyeshadow in your part and it reduces the appearance of your part, makes it look less obvious. And you can also do it along your hairline. They do it in movies all the time. So I could see that being something she used for this interview. People have commented and asked about, her cheeks and maybe looking a little bit more chiseled throughout here. I would say a lot of this probably comes down to makeup. Maybe she had professional hair and makeup today and it just all came across a little bit differently than usual. But back to the interview, I would say they really undermined the issue itself, made it seem a little bit frivolous with their sort of exaggerated and extreme examples that they gave, and the fact that they didn't actually tell us very much about the website and what they're doing to support the cause, which is what's supporting the thoughts online that this is just about information gathering, that they're going to kind of use these stories to their own gain in some way, shape, or form, which is really sad. The biggest problem here that I have with this interview is that there was nothing helpful included. There was no advice. There was no actionable information for families and parents. It's just pointing at a problem and telling people to personalize the problem. And of course, mentioning Harry and Meghan's loose association of the problem, but nothing about actual solutions, no experts, no education. Frustrating and disappointing for important issues like this especially. They want to be seen as leaders and people who have created change and who have a positive impact and who are philanthropists. Well, this was a negative impact. No leadership shown, no education offered. No change can come from just looking at a problem and having Harry telling you it's hopeless and terrifying and Meghan telling you about herself while simultaneously saying nothing at all. From one lens, it looks like they are being taken advantage of by the Sussexes, that their stories will be surrendered, respect ignored, all to boost the hugging victim image of Harry and Meghan. Leave your thoughts in the comments and let's see what we have for question of the day today. Why were Harry and Meghan interviewed for this was the number one question. The story that seems most factual to me is that they submitted this idea to CBS that they wanted to launch this website and were going to invite this small group of parents to get together on the launch day of the website, and CBS picked up on doing a short spot on this under the pretense that it would give this cause some needed publicity. Claudia asked, why are most of Meghan's clothes halter-style necklines lately, or things that show off the shoulder and back? We have seen her in at least 6 halter-style dresses lately. I think that she's just not that into fashion and styling because she doesn't pay that close of attention to it. I just don't think she's very creative with it, is what's going on. She wore almost exclusively shirt dresses for a while. She had an off-the-shoulder phase. She had giant man trousers, GMPs, and button-up tops for a phase. Now it's a lot of halter styles. So I think maybe she just goes through phases. And there's nothing wrong with phases, especially once you find what works well on you, you should stick with it. The problem is that she doesn't choose things that suit her body type well or balance her figure very well. And then on top of it, they don't usually suit the occasion. The problem isn't that she's not super creative with her fashions. The problem is that it's not ticking the boxes of what should be sort of on repeat or a silhouette that's your go-to. And sticking to the clothing question theme here is the reason why Meghan's clothes are always ill-fitting, because she rents them or borrows them or is getting freebies or sample sizes sent. I did answer this quite a while back, I think, but I'll answer it again because you guys have been asking it so much lately. I really don't think that's the case. I don't see her as the type to be sent a lot of freebies from companies because she doesn't have a reputation for dressing super well. She's not, doing press junkets for films and things like that, because that's what happens with actors. They're sent certain things when people know they have a lot of movies coming out and going to be doing press. They want you wearing these things. If you're invited to fashion shows, they'll send you some sample sizes, things like that, or sample clothes. So I don't see her as being a great candidate for receiving lots and lots of sample stuff. And when they do send sample stuff, they usually are really, really careful to make sure it's going to fit well, because they don't want you wearing something that's not fitting well because it won't look right. Also, I don't think she's borrowing these things like from designers, because that's a case where, again, they would make sure it fits you really well, and usually it's for something more high profile, like a red carpet event, awards shows, things like that. You get dressed for that day. You don't get to keep the beautiful, glamorous dress, but they do make sure it fits you to a T. Or sometimes they might make it bespoke for you and you go ahead and buy it because you'd like to keep it. I don't see her as the type to do Rent the Runway at all. And I also don't see her as somebody to buy something and then return it after wearing it. Can you imagine in a place like Los Angeles, walking back into store and returning things that you were photographed in that have been in the news of you wearing it? That would count as wearing it and using the item, and stores could refuse to accept it because they've seen you in the press wearing it in People magazine or something like that. So I don't think that she goes around returning it either. For somebody who's higher in narcissism, that would be incredibly embarrassing, mortifying to have to go and try to return items. So I just don't see that as likely either. What I think is happening is she either doesn't care or she just doesn't get it. She doesn't realize that she's wearing things wrong or that she needs to hem them. She just hasn't gotten there yet. Or she's unwilling to hear it. Or she doesn't want to try. Who knows? Maybe she's a procrastinator and she doesn't actually think ahead to be like, this is what I'll wear to this. She just has stuff sitting in her closet, and then the day of, she's like, oops, it's too long. Oh, well, who knows? I don't know. It's a mystery. But I really just, I don't see the whole borrowing or returning or samples as super likely. I think it's much more likely that she's either completely out of touch and unaware, like she is about a lot of things, clueless about it, not self-aware enough to see how it's coming across, about like everything in life. That is a pattern that's established. So I see that as being a lot more likely than alternative explanations. It is, I understand why everybody speculates and is trying super hard to figure it out, but I think it's just another manifestation of being not self-aware. But leave your thoughts below, and if you have a question of the day that you would like featured, please leave it in the comment section as well. Thank you so much again for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button if you did, and I will see you next time. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye.